as a kid, basically, I was always interested in electronics and music. I played the violin back then, and now even start again playing violin because of those nice apps on the iPad. And later on, I played the bass guitar, and I built radios, etc. So it was kind of a logical step to enter the industry, the music industry. And so I went to study electrical engineering, and eventually became an employee at the Studer company, doing PCM design, digital audio design in '79 was that. And Studer started to do digital audio back then at that time. So they recruited people outside of Studer and built this PCM lab from scratch, basically. And nobody knew anything about digital audio except our boss there, and he taught us everything about digital audio. And that was a kind of a learning experience and pioneering experience. And I was there for 5 years, and at some point, a gentleman came to Studer and asked about an interface he would like to have between two Sony digital audio machines. And Studer doesn't do that custom work, so I did that for him in my spare time. It was a small interface, and it turned out that this gentleman had a mastering studio in Germany, and he knew what's required in terms of processing for mastering, for CD mastering. CD was released, I think, in '82 or '83. So there was a market niche for digital signal processing for mastering studios. And that's how I started my company, because Mr. Bernfeld, this mastering engineer, had the idea to do a system and sell it worldwide. And he knew what's required in terms of signal processing units. And I had the idea to do a modular system which allowed to add modules over time. And we started with just interfacing modules and sampling rate conversion and some level controls and de-emphasis module, all that kind of stuff. And it turned out that this was a real market niche, because we had one competitor, I think, back then, the Neve digital transfer console. So we had big success in selling that modular system, but mainly to the States, because mastering was invented in the States. And there were our first customers buying that. We kept adding modules to this modular system, many different functions, even declicking, and so it kept growing and growing. And eventually we even built mixing consoles based on this modular system. It was kind of, big effort, back then in the 90s. That was, we had AT&T single processors inside our units, floating point, 32-bit floating point processors, which was revolutionary back then, kind of. So it was easier to do signal processing back then, and it allowed us to do consoles like this one here. This is a 24-channel console. It's all modular, so we could have added more channels or whatever. And this particular console was at Sony Music in New York for classical music mixdown, with GML automation, motorized faders, etc. So that's what was about the largest thing we did, based on this modular 2-channel mastering system, basically. Later on we went to 19-inch units, like 19-inch equalizer, compressor limiter, denoiser, declicker, A to D, D to A, all in 19-inch format. So we stopped basically the modular approach for the 19-inch units. The modular approach was actually a very good way to introduce various digital audio processing functions. It kind of was necessary, because all of because of all those different formats, etc. And it also allowed to plug in, say, 3 EQs in series. If you wanted to have 12 EQ bands, for instance, you could plug in 3 EQs, and so it was extremely flexible in terms of signal processing power, etc. And yeah, the Gambit series, how we call those 19-inch units, we still manufacture. We started with them in the 90s, and even 20 or 25 years later, we are still doing them. So it shows the high quality we achieved back then. Of those Gambit units, we now have also plug-in versions made by Softtube for the EQ1 and the DS1, the equalizer and compressor limiter de-esser. And those are very good sounding plugins. We thought that the hi-fi clientele is about as critical as our mastering studio customers in terms of hearing the growing grass, etc. So we took a Pro Audio D2A converter and put it in a different housing, a very nice looking frame, and sold that on the hi-fi market. And it turned out that people wanted to have a whole chain of the same manufacturer. So we started doing CD transport to be able to hook up the D2A converter to it. And yeah, over the years, in 20 plus years, we now do a network player and different D2A converters, streaming devices for high-end hi-fi applications, interfaces as well. So nowadays we do, say, half time we do high-end hi-fi and the other half we do pro audio. So it's kind of 2 different markets, but the clientele is in both markets very critical when it comes to sound quality. And currently we do another D2A converter, one with signal processing built in for the hi-fi market, with various pro audio signal processing features like de-essing, equalization, constant volume, vinyl simulation, all kinds of different algorithms which we think could be useful even at home. Of course, we had to look that the operation is very simple, like the de-esser has 1 knob, like the de-essing amount. So that's fairly demanding to reduce a de-esser to 1 knob operation. It's not easy to achieve that. And yeah, we are also working on a speaker now with PSI Audio from Switzerland, a speaker building company. It's a special speaker. It's a large sound bar with crosstalk cancellation built in. Crosstalk cancellation means that what comes out of the right speaker doesn't go to the left ear. It goes only to the right ear. That's the point, and the same is the left speaker. And if you do that, you have kind of a headphone in the form of a speaker. The headphone is ideally crosstalk cancelled. So if you do that with a speaker, you end up having a huge sound stage around the speaker. It's not just the size of the speaker, but it's much larger, the sound stage. And all instruments on the stage, you can pinpoint to their position exactly. You get the reverberation of the recording space, you get perfectly reproduced. That's a very nice feature of that. Ideally, you would have recordings made with a dummy head for reproduction like this. But even normal stereo program material does work fairly well.